This is Action News 15's Newsmakers. Tonight, we look at one of the hottest issues here in the heartland, the future of this nuclear power plant in our backyard. As tonight, we look at 3 Mile Island, 5 years later.
Hello, I'm Joe Palmieri, and welcome to Action Newsmakers. Since the beginning, nuclear power has been a very controversial source of energy. But never in industry history has one plant gained the notoriety as 3 Mile Island. It was 5 years ago the eyes of the world were on Middletown, Pennsylvania. And for the next half hour, we'll look at 3 Mile Island 5 years later, while at the same time looking to the future. And we'll begin when we come right back. Back in 10 seconds. March 28, 1979. This nation's worst commercial nuclear power plant accident ever, and it's in Middletown, Pennsylvania. First reports from the plant indicated everything was under control, but throughout the day of March 28th and for the next 48 hours, events would transpire showing all was not under control. Governor Thornburg ordered all pregnant women and children out of the immediate area. Rob Side looks back at March 28th and traces the events leading up to the 5th anniversary of the accident at 3 Mile Island just 6 weeks ago.
March 28, 1979 is not the only significant date in TMI's 5-year history. 10 days later, over 200 scientists and engineers gathered at the plant to help plan the shutdown of the Unit 2 reactor. By April 28th, the Unit 2 circulation pumps were turned off and the core began to cool down. 5 months later, on October 24th, Epicor 2 began decontaminating the water, and 8 months later, on June 28th, venting of the containment building began. July 23rd, 1980 goes down in history as the first manned entry inside the containment building, with 2 engineers spending 20 minutes doing visual and radiological testing. On August 8th, GPU estimated the cleanup cost at $500 million over a course of 5 years. It was not until March of 1981 that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission became involved, urging expedient, safe cleanup. Several days later, GPU formed an advisory board to appraise the cleanup process. Then on June 3rd, the U.S. Department of Energy got involved, taking responsibility for the radioactive waste generated from the 700,000 gallons of water from the containment building. On July 9th, Governor Thornburg unveiled a plan to spread the cleanup cost among the federal government, nuclear utility industry, and Pennsylvania and New Jersey ratepayers. The first batch of radioactive water, meanwhile, was processed on September 25th, just a few days before the Reagan administration agreed to spend $1 billion on the cleanup. It was April 7th in 1982, nearly 2 years ago, that the Department of Energy agreed to take possession of the entire damaged Unit 2 core for research. 5 months later, the wall and floor surfaces of that core were first washed down. Then on January 26th of 1983, GPU revised their cleanup plan, saying it would cost $975 million and would not be completed until mid-1988. Last August, the final shipment of radioactive waste was transported to a disposal site in Washington State. And this year, in February, the Polar Crane successfully raised the 214-pound test load to qualify for lifting the 170-ton reactor head. That's where we stand to date on the events that have occurred since March 28th, 5 years ago.
The issue now is the possible restart of the plant. That may come as early as next month. Within the next couple of weeks, testing will be going on at 3 Mile Island. Testing that will see if the hardware at the plant is ready to be used again. The hot functional testing, as it is called, was approved last month. What it will do is see how the Unit 1 reactor works, but it won't involve any nuclear material. But the approval for the testing itself has brought the whole issue of the plant back into the spotlight, with opponents calling it the last step to a restart of a dangerous nuclear facility, and plant owners saying it's a needed step.
Okay, now, why is the restart so important to GPU?
Well, over the long term, 3 Mile Island is a basic part of GPU's generation capacity, and it's a system that serves 3 companies and 4 million people. And in the interest of those people in that region, which includes half the land area of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, it's power that is needed now and will be needed increasingly in the future.
Is there any estimate how much the average electric user would save if TMI is started at a low capacity?
Well, there would be a modest saving probably to Metropolitan Edison customers with the restart of Unit 1, probably in the order of something like 3%.
Is that significant enough to
Well, I think the significance of the restart is more in terms of having an assured supply of reliable energy and as a stabilizing factor in rates rather than as a very sharp reduction.
Okay, Mr. Bedell, one more quick question. People say that there are health problems because of the radiation. Do you agree with that?
No, we don't. We have, there have been no findings and there aren't likely to be any because the amount of radiation when all is said and done that was released during the Unit 2 accident was extremely minimal.
But there are those who disagree with Mr. Bedell's findings on both the rates and the health effects. They range from residents living in the shadow of the giant plant to nationally known consumer advocate Ralph Nader.
Don't worry, the best brains in the scientific world are going to be in charge of this technology. The best brains. Some of them never made it to GPU.
GPU right now is fairly gung-ho. They've been moving towards restart. Commissioner Bernthal was there Friday. He seemed very pleased with the way things were going. And there's very little that stands in the way of restart right now, the way the NRC's mentality and mindset has been the last few months.
So the vote could come as early as June. The restart could come as early as June.
Right.
What is your group doing in the next few weeks as that looms?
Well, you know, it's been 5 years, and we pursued legislative means, we pursued judicial means, we've used referendums. I don't want to say that we've exhausted all our resources, but it seems that we pursued every avenue, and it's a bit frustrating. I've been in contact with both U.S. senators and congressmen from the area, and some would like to pursue hearings. Everyone is opposed to restart until the management issue is resolved, and also until there's funding in place for Unit 2. I think the prime person to focus on right now is Governor Thornburg. Get him to actually say what he can do to prevent restart. Aside from that, it's just a continual pressure on the NRC and elected officials.
If the restart does occur, I'm sure your group is looking into the future. If the restart does occur, what will you do then?
Well, it's hard to say what we'll do. I'm sure the reaction will be one emotional, frustration and anger. What we can actually do, our recourse is limited since the NRC is an autonomous agency. I mean, we can go to the courts and hopefully block the order for a very limited period of time. Outside of that, there's really nothing we can do. It's really up to the governor or even the President of the United States to make a decision on that matter. The NRC is an agency out of control, like the technology itself. You know, for us, I really don't think there's anything we can do personally. It's really out of our hands when it gets to that point. You know, our goal is not to let it get to that point.
3 Mile Island has turned out to be much more than just a crippled power plant. It's turned into a social issue, a political hot potato. That's why all the presidential candidates are very quick to come here and make their feelings known.
The facts speak for themselves. Based on what we now know, 3 Mile Island should not be allowed to reopen.
Time to close this plant forever. Not only to protect the people of Pennsylvania and their safety, but also to lend strength to other communities all over the country who are fighting for control of their futures in the face of nuclear development.
Gary Hart was not quite as quick as his Democratic counterparts in calling for the closing. He said more studying should be done. On the other side of the fence, Vice President George Bush said nuclear power should be made safer, but not done away with.
We are not turning our back on nuclear power. We look down the line and see the energy requirements of this country. We see not only has nuclear power been used safely in our country, but we see what's happening in France. And so what the role of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission should be is to be darn sure that whatever is done with the utmost in safety in mind, but we must not, as a country, turn our back on nuclear power.
On the next segment of Action Newsmakers, we'll talk to some of the people living next to 3 Mile Island and find out what their lives have been like since March 28th, 1979.
I know that it certainly has had a psychological effect on us, the accident. There are scars there that will never, ever go away.
After word of the accident was released, it did not take long for residents to take to the highways. Ironically, one of the heaviest traveled roads was Route 441, which is in front of 3 Mile Island. It also became a kind of freak show. Literally hundreds of people waited in front for a catastrophe to happen. One of those people who left the area back in 1979 was Paula Kinney. She has since started an organization made up of mothers opposed to the restart. Paula looks back on what it was like on that day in 1979.
All I wanted to do was to leave the area, just get the kids' clothes together, and when we left, I never thought of taking anything material. I mean, nothing. I just wanted to go. And I know it was 5 years ago, but there were so many things that I can remember so vividly. And when we were pulling down the driveway, I saw my daughter, who's 16 now. I saw her girlfriend's mother. They had grown up to, they were both the same age and did everything together. And she was looking out the window, waving to us while she was waiting for her husband. And the look that Barb and I gave each other was very, I think then the reality really set in that this might be, God knows if we would ever be able to see each other again, whether we would ever be able to come back into the area. And I think then it really, really hit me. And also, as Joyce said, it really puts your perspectives in order. What is more important to you? And there was just no question.
5 years later now, you look back, for you and your family, there must be some mental scars that you have.
Yes, I'm a different person. Prior to the accident, I graduated in high school in '65. The Vietnam War was in full swing, and when I'd see the news clips on TV of the protesters with their signs and so on, and I thought, my God, how can they be such fools? How can they question the government? We wouldn't be in a war unless, et cetera, et cetera. I couldn't believe it because I was brought up that you don't question, they know what you're doing, and I trusted them. Little did I know that years down the line I would be marching down the same streets in Washington carrying signs. But I feel as though I have a moral obligation. I have a moral obligation, not just to my family and friends and neighbors, but also to other people who live near nuclear power plants, so that they never have to go through what we did.
One person with a little more at stake than most Middletown residents is Mayor Robert Reed. Reed is a tireless worker for his community, whether it be selling I Love Middletown bumper stickers for his town or explaining the situation at the plant. Mayor Reed was in office when the accident occurred, and he believes a lot has changed over the past 5 years, including people's perception of 3 Mile Island. According to the mayor, things would be different if that accident occurred today.
I don't think the people would be upset as much as they were back in '78. Over the past 5 years, people have become educated as far as nuclear energy is concerned. 5 years ago, most of the people had to use their imaginations, and their imaginations ran away with them. There was mass confusion. I think today, if the same situation would take place, people could sort out the fact from the fiction. There's still a lot of concern as far as what's going on down there. A lot of people are concerned that it hasn't been cleaned up as quickly as they thought it should be. There's a problem with money, and there's a lot of unanswered questions that people would like to have answers to. The indictment with the 11 charges and the no contest and the not guilty as far as, and the guilty as far as the Metropolitan or GPU is concerned. A lot of people felt that because the case, the indictment, the 11 charges didn't go to court, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and a lot of people would like to know the answers to the questions.
What were you doing when you heard about the problems?
Well, I was in school. As you know, I teach school, I was notified by my civil defense director that an accident had taken place down at 3 Mile Island. He had no idea what happened. I came to my office. I tried to call different organizations or people to find out exactly what was going on. No one knew anything. Television stations didn't know anything. Radio stations didn't know anything. And I did manage to get a hold of someone at the island. They told me who to contact at the home office in Reading. I called there, and I was assured that no one had been hurt in the accident, and there was no release of radiation. And I guess it was about a minute or so later, I did find out that there was a release of radiation, and at that point I was a little upset. I felt that I wasn't being told the truth, and I felt as long as we were dealing with the accident, we were going to be told things that we would just have to live with, but really be in doubt about.
A lot of other people who live in Middletown also feel they weren't told the truth, and some believe that's still the case. There are those residents who don't feel the owners of the plant have been truthful about the amount of radiation that seeped from the huge plant. And now, some here are afraid that levels of radiation leaked is much higher, and that could be dangerous.
It was 5 years ago this neighborhood near Middletown, Pennsylvania was ravaged by the accident at 3 Mile Island. But now, life for the most part is getting back to normal. For many families, the nightmare is over.
But some of the people here say there's more to it. They think there may be physical problems because of the accident. They say the cancer rate in this neighborhood alone is staggering.
This development where we live has an enormous amount of cancer. That cancer rate is very high in this area.
Paula Kinney is one of the many people now
accident,
concerned over the number of cancer cases in this neighborhood, a figure they believe is very high, but they don't have any proof.
There has been no documentation on low-level releases in a populated area. Nothing. Why not?
We know that radiation is accumulative. It does not go away. It stays within your body. So for our children's sake, we need that documentation. We need to find out answers so that we can help others living around nuclear power plants that aren't going through what we're going through.
The group says they don't know if the nuclear power plant is the cause, but it's a question they want to find the answer to soon.
For most people here in Middletown, the accident was an experience they'll never forget. And they'll also remember that day when the tragedy hit.
I was at work at the time, I'm not sure, but I was at work also, New Cumberland Army Depot.
Is that something that's just going to stick in your mind? Will you remember that?
Yes, but I'm one of the people that I was only upset until I got home and found out everything was safe at home. And after that, I live I can see it from my house. So we stayed at home. All we did was take our dog out to make sure if anything went wrong, and we went to work each day. We packed a suitcase and kept it in our car just in case.
I think it was about 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and I was at work at the Revenue in Pennsylvania.
How did you find out?
Over the radio.
What was your reaction?
Very traumatic. Everybody was all excited.
I was more or less worried about my folks and the people around me, and what was going on at the plant at the time, whether we were being told the truth. And
you still have those concerns today?
Sure. Every day when you hear about mismanagement and tests being fraudulently taken, and you wonder why the PUC even can consider keeping that place gone.
No, I couldn't really remember that much, but I just took off out of the town. My mom wanted me to leave, so I just left with her, so I didn't have nothing else to do.
How about looking back now? What are your memories of that day?
I was a little bit scared, but not that much. I just figured if you go, you go.
I had just walked around the yard. It was a day like today, and the flowers were starting to come up. I was out walking around and didn't realize anything had happened until my daughter called me and said that they had a problem down there. So
what was your reaction to all that?
We were scared. Still am.
5 years ago, I was in Harrisburg.
All right, do you remember what you were doing when you heard about a problem?
I don't know. I was at work when that happened. Yeah. No, but I don't know. I don't know why they're bringing it up so much. I really don't. It's just as bad as Watergate, this situation.
You think it's being overplayed?
Yes, indeed, very much so.
For many families, the whole experience has affected them in a lot of ways, and most say it will take a long time for the nightmare to end and the scars to heal.
There are many people out there that aren't dealing with it.
I can see them if I'm looking. I don't look in that direction. Too much pain.
Articles all week long.
Too much pain.
It's been 5 years since the accident at the island, and across the nation the memory is fading. But for people in neighborhoods like this one, they say they can't forget.
So it was a very difficult time, very painful. And as a result, I had a lot of anger, a lot of fear, resentment, and a definite violation of my trust and confidence in the government and the NRC, the utility. I felt as if I'd been raped. Everything had been taken away from me that was my foundation.
The huge nuclear power plant is still closed, sitting idle on the Susquehanna River. Less than a mile away, life in the small town of Middletown, Pennsylvania appears normal. But even some 5 years later, many of the people in this neighborhood still live in fear.
There are scars there that will never, ever go away. When a siren rings, I can be in a dead sleep, and I can hear a siren, and I feel my heart palpitating, and I realized right after the accident that every time a siren rang, I'd think to myself, oh God, let it be somebody's house on fire. And I realized what I was saying. That's not the normal thing to think. But I have such fears of the island.
Many people who live near the plant want it to stay closed. Families that have gone through so much say they are bitter, not at the plant or nuclear power, but at the owners.
They were indicted for leak falsification rates. They were indicted. See, to me, I would think that would be enough for the NRC to say, look, no license. You blew it.
3 Mile Island may reopen as early as this June. That's if it gets federal approval. But while the plant's future may be up in the air, many families already know what they'll do if it restarts.
We lived here for 16 years. I love my neighbors. I really love it here. It's not a whole lot, but we worked hard for what we have. But knowing what I know now, I can't stay here.
That's also how some families feel around the plant, and they may just find themselves facing that decision as early as next month. That's when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is expected to vote on the restart of the undamaged Unit 1 reactor. The commission met 2 weeks ago with staff members to go over investigations of GPU and to check out whether the owners had made safety improvements the commission said was needed before a restart could ever happen. Now the vote is just a couple of weeks away, and only NRC commissioners know right now what the future of the plant will be, and they're not letting anyone else know. The newest commissioner on the NRC came to 3 Mile Island last month to tour the crippled plant, and afterwards said a lot of questions still had to be answered.
Frederick Brenthal, who was appointed to the commission last August, came to 3 Mile Island to take a look at the plant. The visit was important because the NRC will soon be deciding whether Unit 1 is ready to start up again. At a news conference, Brenthal said he couldn't say whether he thought the plant looked ready today.
Because we are under certain restraints, I can't speak in detail of that because we frankly haven't had all the facts laid before us yet.
Brenthal said he has 3 major questions before he would agree to the restart. First, to see if the hardware at the plant is okay, and then the steam generator. But the big question is the leak and other allegations against the company that he says are still unanswered. Brenthal disagreed with other commissioners who say they may overlook these questions for now and vote on a restart in June. But Brenthal says he thinks June may be too optimistic a date right now.
The June timetable is one, I guess, that gets tossed around a bit, partly because the utility feels and believes that its hardware can be ready by June, and partly because of the responsibility that we feel we have to the licensee to try to provide them with some kind of milestone of where we are. Yes, sir.
Brenthal met with local townspeople earlier in the day to talk about the problems at the plant. He told them there are still a lot of improvements the NRC has to make, not only for nuclear power in the future, but also so another accident like the one at 3 Mile Island never happens again.
It's been 5 years now since the accident at 3 Mile Island, and it seems as if the giant plant is in the news today almost as much as it was in 1979. And with questions like radiation effects still unanswered and the restart possible, it's likely 3 Mile Island and all the controversy will be in the news for years to come. I'm Joe Palmieri for Action Newsmakers. Thank you for watching.